Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode.
Today we're talking about being too tired to transform when the pressure to start fresh at New Year just makes you feel even more burnt out.
Yes, that mix of guilt, pressure, and low-key dread. You've barely survived December and suddenly everyone's asking about your goals, your word for the year, your vision board, and you just want to lie down.
Exactly. So we'll be talking about what happens when New Year, New Me culture collides with perfectionism and what it means to live in a world that's obsessed with progress, even when your nervous system just wants to rest.
We'll also talk about the other side of it. The people who feel flat in January, who aren't excited, who wonder why everyone else seems so motivated when they just feel stuck.
Basically, this one's for anyone who's ever started the year already tired.
Let's get into it. I do like picking a word for the year.
Me too. And I say that with a hesitation because 2025 was a very different year for me in terms of New Year planning. Like normally I'm all over it. So it was right kind of back to probably even like my teens, my 20s. I would love New Year's resolutions. I would love it. I'd be so determined and it would never work out. You know, by the third week of January, probably like a lot of people, like just it had gone. And then I realized that there was a different way to do things. So I came across something called the Day Zero Project, which I think is actually a really cool idea. So it's where you do 101 things in 1,001 days. So it's less.
What? I'm trying to get my head around that. Say that again.
So it's 101 things in 1,001 days. So I think it's just over 3 years.
Okay.
So you make a list of 101 things and you commit to doing them in 1,001 days. And that felt like it took the pressure off. And there was such a variety of things that even if I wasn't continuing with whatever running plan I'd come up with, I could shift to another thing on the 101 list.
Okay. Yeah.
So that felt workable. And then I shifted to other things that I'll probably talk about as we go through the episode. And then last year, I don't know what happened, but I ended up buying at least 4 different planners to try and plan for the year.
4.
Oh,
dear.
So that's 3 physical ones and a digital one that I can think of just sitting here now. And I have used one of them very intermittently throughout the year. But yeah, normally I have a word of the year. I also have a friend who is, I don't know what her title is, but she's in a church. And so Epiphany, she gives everybody a star word, which is like some kind of, I think mine was rest for this year, which has gone brilliantly. So I like to have these little anchor words to come back to. But yeah, this year for me has been very different and I'm still trying to figure out why that might be. But yeah, word of the year is something that that's something that you like.
Yeah, but before I come on to that, I just want to say I feel like you've totally answered the question that I had coming into this episode. As I was sitting thinking about what we're going to talk about with the episode, I thought, is this still a thing? Do people still get caught up and wrapped up in this? Is this episode done now? And I think you've just confirmed, no, it's absolutely still a thing that we get pulled into and that we still do. But yeah, I changed to word of the year rather than setting resolutions for myself because that seemed kinder. And rather than it being a thing that I have to do, it's more a thing that I was working towards. Like I didn't have to achieve it. I just had to hold that word in mind and work towards it. So for example, for 2025, my word was visible. And it was visible due to the difficulties to put myself out there, to put my opinions and my thoughts out there. And can I just say, because of this podcast, I have truly nailed it. Even though I've just said it's not something to achieve, but I have achieved it.
Yeah.
I've done it. I've been more visible.
Mm-hmm.
So I quite like that. It feels like less of a pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose there's that balance, isn't there? Because people always say you should set SMART goals.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they can be quite limiting then, because there is that kind of on the wagon, off the wagon feeling of either you're doing it or you've failed. And it can be hard to keep motivation up all of the time. So yeah, I think like you, having a word of the year, it just feels like a gentler way, or like you can. So what I think about is the way that living as a neurodivergent person can be very up and down. So energy can be up and down, motivation can be up and down. And I feel like having a word of the year can work no matter where you are on that up and down.
Yeah.
Whereas having SMART goals, if you've got no energy and you're at the point where you're in bed, you can't do your running plan. It's not going to, I'm just using running because that's kind of the main thing that pops into my head when I think about New Year's resolutions. So yeah, there's that flexibility. And I think that flexibility of goals is important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. Coming back to the idea of, is this still a thing? Because that's what I was holding in mind as the episode started. Because I feel like there's been conversations around this now for quite a few years, whether that's in books, articles, podcasts, social media content, about scrapping this new year, new me, and about all of the pressure that it puts on people. And because it's something that has been openly spoken about for quite a while now, I was a bit like, yeah, has everyone just scrapped that? Do people really put so much pressure on themselves and still feel like New Year is the time to make those big changes? And of course, it definitely is. But what is also funny is I think that I've got out of it. I don't think I actually have.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm like, oh, I'm above this now. I've come out of it. But actually, I don't think that I have, because I've still noticed some thoughts coming into my mind about things I'd like to do. And then there's that voice that pops up into my head that's like, oh, you could just start that in January. And so I still think it's so easy to kind of fall victim to the fresh start effect.
Yes. Yeah. So as you were saying about, if people just let go of this, I was like, well, I wonder which people Carly's got in her mind. And I was thinking about different groups of people that I know about. So I'm thinking about, so at the moment in business spaces or like entrepreneur spaces, everything seems to be about there's so many days left in the year to like finish your goals for this year, and then I know that the next bit will be what are your goals for next year, and then I was thinking about, so last year in the content that was coming up in my social media, there seemed to be a big shift to, well, December's not actually the new year, and actually the new year is, I think, maybe the spring equinox. I always get mixed up if they're equinoxes or solstices.
I think that's the same.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, it's like that isn't the new year. The new year is when the new life starts with spring. So actually, you don't have to do it all now. And December is for resting. And so I'm just thinking about the different ways that different groups of people might approach it. I imagine like the gym type people are still very much New Year's resolution, because that feels like a classic. I think the biggest thing when I think of New Year's resolutions, it's losing weight or being more active.
Yeah, definitely. My head, though, has got really distracted by something that you said before, because it reminded me when you were talking about the calendar and the start of the year, and so much in relation to our calendar and the way that it's structured. Well, it is man-made.
Yeah.
But I saw a YouTube video once, and essentially it was talking about if we were to structure our calendar like this, it made so much more sense, and it made everything equal in terms of days and months and things like that. It made so much more sense for the calendar to be how this person described it. Just like, why is that the case? When you think about months that have 30 days, 31 days, then for whatever's going on with February, and then how there isn't actually 365 days in a year anyway, it's 365 and a quarter. That is so messy. When this person described this really neat way to be able to run the calendar each year, it feels like that makes so much more sense.
That's really triggered my rabbit hole tendency. And I'm like, can we just pause the recording now and go and find out why is it like this?
I might see if I can find it and put it in the show notes in case anyone's interested, because I want to watch it again now as well. Like, what was it? What was it that they said? But I know it made sense. But
Yeah.
why doesn't it start in spring anyway? I feel like that's just so much nicer.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I've got no idea actually why that is considered the new year. We've added months in, haven't we?
Have we?
There hasn't always been 12 months.
No, I think you're right there, actually.
I think there were other months.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. What I'm kind of sat with there is the contrast between the natural world and the capitalist society that we live in and the impact that capitalism has on New Year expectations.
Yeah. And now that you've pointed it out, I haven't really thought about it before, but January is like literally the worst month to try and start something new, really, when it's the darkest, grimmest, when we've all run out of money and we're all festive seasoned and peopled out to start the new year with then, okay, now what are your goals and what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And so my birthday's in January. So it's like that's the saving grace of January for me.
Okay. Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, it's just such a bleak. I think I might have spoken about this in other episodes as well, maybe about, just January and February being so cold and so bleak. Yeah, we definitely did. It was on an episode where we were talking about fairy lights, probably one of the festive episodes. Like you've got in kind of autumn and winter up to Christmas, you've got all the festivity, the coziness of autumn and the festivity of Christmas. And then January, February, there's not really anything there.
We're going back to what you were saying about the types of goals people set.
Mm.
There does seem to be a big focus on exercise and weight loss.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? I'm just thinking about the advertising that's pumped to us all the time. That I think there is this idea that if you were slimmer, your life would be better.
Yes.
Or if you were fitter, your life would be better. Capitalism does just push the idea that if you are thinner or fitter, your overall life will be better.
Yeah, but there's no clarification of better how. And does better equal more happy? Yeah, okay. If you build up strength, your life might be better because you can now open that difficult jar. That's the kind of thing I'd like to be able to do, have the strength to actually open jars. So yes, your life could be better in that regards, but it doesn't mean you'll be happier. And I think that's where people conflate certain outcomes with then that means I will be happy, rather than, well, you might have that outcome, but you might still feel exactly how you feel now.
Yeah.
So much of this comes down to the fresh start effect, which is a known psychological phenomenon that the fresh start effect does boost motivation and drive in order to start something new. But at the same time, it also increases pressure to perform. And that's where we can get into a perfectionist way of thinking in terms of this is my chance to finally get it right and then keep it like that, rather than, as you know, so many of the goals and New Year's resolutions that people set for themselves fizzle out within a few weeks. And that's not to say they're not worth setting, but how sustainable ultimately are the things that we set for ourselves. But when they do fizzle out, we then just revert back to what being a failure, can't get anything right, can't stick at anything.
Yeah.
But when I was saying earlier about how I had almost this sense of, oh, I'm above this now, but actually things still do creep in. Just an example of that is I suck at keeping any kind of skincare regime, and I'll buy new things thinking I'll get motivated by this new product, but it only lasts, of course, a certain amount of time, and then it just sits in the cupboard forever, not being used. But recently I was speaking to friends of mine, and one of my friends who's very much into their skincare, and to be fair, has like flawless skin since she's been properly into her skincare, was like horrified that I just don't have a skincare regime. So for my birthday, she bought me some products and I was like, I'm going to try and get back into having a skincare regime. So then she got me other products for my birthday and I was like, oh, amazing. And I still haven't started it yet. So in the back of my head, I'm like, I'll start it in January.
And this time you'll definitely stick to it, right?
This time I will, and I'll have the best skin you've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess the fresh start effect also brings on when people talk about new year, new me, it's also this idea of a clean slate, it's a total fresh start, new beginning, going to be a new person this year, a different person this year, forgetting or maybe trying to not acknowledge that all of our baggage from all the previous years still do carry forwards into January 1st.
Yeah. I'm just really in a capitalist rant zone.
Are you?
Yeah, I just feel like it's just so tied to that. Like we're constantly given the idea that if we buy something, whether it's new running shoes or a latest diet plan, or even if it's not in the realm of weight loss and exercise, you know, the latest thing for your home or this item of clothing or whatever, that will somehow become, you know, whatever the emotion in the advert is showing.
Yes.
And it just isn't the case. It just.
No, well, we're hit with those literally all year.
Mhm.
But this time of year, they ramp up even more intentionally with that psychological messaging to lean into. They know that we get caught up in new year, new me, and intentionally target the messaging to do so, which we then fall for and still go out and buy and do all of these things. And it does make me really angry, actually, when I connect with that. How these multimillionaires of these big companies, and I've said this before, but the majority of them are owned by men who are perpetuating the same insecurities through the companies to then make us buy their product and make them richer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I so just want to rebel against that. I like want everybody to rebel against it. So the whole structure just comes tumbling down. That would be nice. But it increases the pressure again. More adverts for weight loss and gym memberships and things like that just really spike at this time of year as well. And it continues with that conditional messaging and subliminal messaging of this is a thing that you need to do in order to be happy, to have made it, to be doing well, to be achieving as a human being. And when we tie that in with how we're then comparing ourselves with people on social media or people that we went to school with, and we see the bodies that they inhabit, the cars that they drive, the houses that they live in, the clothes that they wear, if they have flawless skin, all of those types of things, then we want to feel like we're keeping up, that we're being seen to be doing well in life too.
Yeah, so there's like a status thing and a
There is certainly for me.
yeah. I was just so as you were talking, I was thinking about I wonder about the balance then between living intentionally, which feels important to me. And I think it does feel helpful to have a point in the year and at which I review, like, am I on track? Am I on track doesn't quite feel right, but like, am I taking actions to move more towards the kind of life that I want to have? Or am I getting further away from it? Or am I just kind of stagnant? I do feel that is important to me, but it feels very different now to it feels very different now to what I think of as traditional New Year's resolutions setting.
Perhaps there's a difference between traditional New Year's Eve goal setting and whatever we might coin the types of goal setting that other people or that yourself is talking about there, where it's not that it's a bad thing to have goals or to use the next year as a way to review where you are in life and making sure that you're moving towards what you want to move towards, whilst then also checking in on what are the things is it that you're moving towards, and will those things actually make you happy? Are those things important overall? Because if your overall goal is to, I don't know, get a £40,000 car, yeah, is that a worthwhile goal ultimately in the grand scheme of what maybe feels important or that you value in life and what ultimately is going to make you happy? And I do think there are different ways to do that. It's just reminded me, actually, my friend Sarah, she records a New Year message to
I've seen her
herself.
talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah, so she does a video to herself talking about what's happened over the course of the year and then just setting intentions for the following year. And then at the end of the year, she'll review that video and then kind of do another one. And I've always thought that sounds really cool and lovely. And for anybody else that thinks that would be a good idea, where it's more like your year in review and how has the year gone compared to what you hoped for at the start of the year. And that's also making me think of language, because in therapy, and definitely in different modalities of therapy, there can be a focus on goals. And it's not that I'm goal averse, but I tend to try to use the word intentions because it feels kinder and more compassionate than a goal. You know, a goal is something to achieve or fail at and not get, whereas an intention, it feels less absolute. It feels like this is what I'm going to work towards. And it reminds me of what you said earlier, actually, about if it's an intention, it's okay if sometimes it dips, if things shift in your life and it's going to make it harder. And then when things get a little bit better, maybe there's a difference between setting your hopes for the year or your intentions for the year, depending on ultimately how the year ends up going, versus this is a goal that I want to achieve and I want to achieve it by this date. And then I want to stick at it consistently forever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because part of me is like, yeah, intentions, that's where it's at. But I know there's another part of me that can be quite avoidant and will just be like, well, don't have to do it today. Well,
Okay,
don't have to do
sure.
it today. And then before I know it, it's December again and I've done nothing towards it. And I'm in the middle of, so I've set myself actually a challenge. I'm doing 40 minutes of walking, 40 minutes a day. It was supposed to be before my 40th birthday, but I started it late, so it will end 3 days after my 40th birthday. So at the moment, I am in a place of, yeah, there's the chance of failure because I might not get to do it. I think today is day 10, and I haven't done it yet, but I will go after we've recorded the 4th episode that we're recording today. So I think for me, there's a balance that's important, that sometimes I do need to be specific and hold myself to things. But I think the way that I go about that is different. And the way that I respond to myself if I don't stick to whatever the challenge is. I was going to say goal. It doesn't really feel like a goal. Yeah, whatever the challenge is, it is also different. So going into this, it's not like, yeah, it's not on the wagon or off the wagon. If I miss a day, I miss a day, and I'll just keep going as much as I can. Whereas in the past, it would have been like, oh, well, didn't stick to that either. And it would just become something that reinforced the idea that I wasn't very good at sticking to things. And then I'd just finish rather than supporting myself to carry on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that almost sounds like you're saying the problem isn't in goal setting, but how we're interacting with the goal setting. You know, if someone sets themselves the goal of running a marathon,
Yeah.
and they train and they train, and it's the day of the marathon, and they manage to complete 3/4 of it before having to bow out. And somebody could then look at that like, I have failed my goal, and beat themselves up and feel really down about it. Whereas somebody else might look at that and said, before I wasn't running, today I completed 3/4 of a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And they might approach that from a place of kindness and compassion and actually still celebrating how far that they have come, which is significantly different from the starting point.
Yeah.
And may still get benefit from having set that goal, even if they didn't officially complete it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, but even with the second kind of version there, where the person's able to still celebrate what they have achieved, that there can also be room for disappointment. Like it would be okay and understandable to feel disappointed that you hadn't managed to finish. If that's, if that's what you've been working towards and you haven't managed to finish, that you can hold the disappointment and the celebration alongside each other.
Yeah, definitely. It's being able to hold both without then slipping into that total collapse of I'm rubbish, I'm failure, shouldn't have even done this to begin with.
Yeah.
And going down that route.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a hallmark of perfectionism, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I do it perfectly or not at all.
Yeah.
And nobody can do things perfectly.
Yeah. So a lot of what we're talking about is how much we plan for the future. So what we're planning to do, whether that's tomorrow, the next month, the next year, 5 years' time, a lot of us can end up being quite future focused and planning for what we want to have rather than looking at what we do have. So why do you think so many of us feel safer planning the future rather than being present in the now?
Ooh. So I think I touched on this last time so when we talked about philosophy and I was talking about observing and that I spend a lot of time observing rather than living. I think I think it can be similar with planning. So I love planning. I think I get enjoyment out of the planning, but also I think it can keep me in a state of illusion. So when I'm planning, I can achieve the perfect life that I want to achieve. But as soon as I start taking action, it's trickier. I mean, it takes effort. I have to stand up for a start. you gotta move. So there's definitely something in that while I'm in the planning phase, I have total control over what's going to happen. So if I think about, my business, I think about, right, okay, this is how much money I'm going to earn this year. This is achievable. Here are the slots I've got available for clients. Here are the other ways that I can think about bringing some money in. When I'm in that planning phase, I don't have to think about, is one of my children going to get sick? Am I going to get sick and for how long? Am I going to have clients that end unexpectedly? All different kinds of things that then get in the way of, my business costs going to go up. Just all things that are going to change, that feel messy and frustrating. It really just gives me the illusion of making progress on something.
Yeah.
Because I can spend like a whole intense day planning things out, and it feels I've got a piece of paper on the wall here that I did at the end of January. And I just remember the feeling when I got to the end of that page. So I've handwritten it. It's in purple pen that I love to write in. And my handwriting's really neat. And it just looks so like I feel happy just looking at this piece of paper. And I have achieved plenty of things on there. But my life isn't how I thought it would be when I was writing it. And I think again, it's back to that perfectionist idea that if I just work hard enough, if I just get it right enough, I'll be able to live this life that never hurts. I think that's the thing, that never hurts. That there's no risk of criticism, there's no risk of failure, that it's just a breeze.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast once that was talking about how so many of us are searching to solve enough problems so that there are no more problems, and that life is ultimately just a series of problems. Honestly, I died a little bit inside because I was like, no, I feel like, that's like we're trying to get to the point where we don't have pain, where we don't suffer, where we don't have problems.
Yeah.
And the moment they said life is just a series of problems, I was just like, oh no. Yeah, they're right. It really is. We can't outrun it. Yeah, it's so true what you're saying, that so much of our planning comes to how can we reduce distress? How can we reduce stress? How can we reduce pain? How can we ultimately reach this goal of happiness, which there are just so many elements of storytelling as we grow up around being happy, like it's a state of being rather than a fleeting emotion like all the rest. And even though we know that, I feel like that's still what we're trying to have. We're still trying to have more of the pleasant feeling emotions and less of the not nice feeling emotions as much as possible. Obviously, of course, we're going to want that.
Yeah.
But it is so difficult. And there are so many things that I've planned for that life then gets in the way of. And you think, oh, if I just get there, then things will be better. Speaking of business, I had a certain income in my mind to achieve. And if I achieved it, I would have just extra breathing space and extra breathing room and be able to have holidays and things like that. And I actually reached it and it was amazing. And then the cost of living crisis happened. And then business rates all went up and keep still going up, as well as personal costs every year. And all of the progress I made genuinely just disappeared. I was earning more money, but my baseline was basically back to the same as it was before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now in the past 2 years, because I operate as a limited company, they've introduced national insurance rates, and now they've announced the dividends rate is going up to target the ultra wealthy people that are invested in loads of different companies. And I'm like, it's just little old me. I'm going to probably be even worse off than maybe I was 3 or 4 years ago.
Mhm.
I mean, this episode's not about that, so I'll stop there. But it's like you have these goals that you work really hard to achieve, and something happens totally outside of your control.
Yeah.
And it's gone. And I think that's kind of what you were speaking to before about when we plan, it creates this illusion of control that we can see what's going to happen and where we're going to be in X amount of time.
Yeah.
And anything could be around the corner. That means that that's either not possible or it's been moved further away from you again.
Yeah. My body doesn't like that idea. I can feel in my stomach squirming away and wanting to say, do you know what? Actually, I don't think we're going to do a podcast anymore. Yeah, to kind of bring it back to a new year angle, I think it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? You know, you can set these goals, and even if you set it as an intention for yourself, like you can set however you want to set it, and then life happens or the reality of motivation happens. And I think people misunderstand motivation a lot of the time.
Okay.
Like I think people see it as something that they can generate themselves, or like it's about willpower. You can like will yourself to have enough motivation, or if you just think about it differently, you can have enough motivation. But I think it's normal. Like it's completely normal to lose motivation. Like that has to be part of the plan. Is like, how am I going to keep working towards this goal when I lose motivation? Not if I lose motivation, but when, because I don't think humans are supposed to have constant motivation. I think again, that's a capitalist idea, isn't it? That you can just robot your way through life because that's what suits mega business owners, because then you're constantly working to produce or constantly buying. That's just not a realistic way to live. So there will be the slump. And I just think how we handle the slump is such a big change point. So I wrote a blog post years ago now, must have been like 2017 or 2018 or something like that. It was ages ago. And it was called something like The Upside to Failing Your New Year's Resolutions.
Okay.
And it's one of my favorite things that I've ever written, because it's just a real perspective shift on failure, I suppose. And essentially what I said in that blog post was that if you've set out a plan for yourself and you haven't been able to follow it, then instead of just focusing on the fact that you've failed, there's a really good opportunity here to learn something. Like it hasn't worked out for some reason, and you can use that information to create a new plan or to change direction slightly or to learn something about yourself. You know, if you've set yourself a plan to run 3 days a week for the rest of your life, but you get 2 weeks in and you realize you hate running, you could look at it in one way and think, right, well, I've failed at my plan. And maybe that's true, but you've learned something really important about yourself. And instead of getting into a loop of like, oh, I failed again and I'm always a failure and I always do this, you could just pivot to, I've just found out I don't like running. So what else am I going to do? How does my body want to move? And I'm always asking my body questions, but like, how do my arms want to move? How does my spine want to move? And maybe it's swimming, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's, yoga, like whatever it might be, that there's really important information in that. And and it's about staying with yourself rather than turning on yourself.
Yeah, that message there is quite key. Many of the things we've spoken about so far this episode, in terms of the way in which you then, rather than stick with the goals, stick out working with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than the turning against yourself. And whether that is reframing something into a positive, or whether it's acknowledging that this did fail and that's okay, and what did I learn from it? And like you said, planning for what am I going to do when I lose the motivation? Or what am I going to do if something happens, which means I can't do this at all for a week, 2 weeks, a month? How will I support myself to get back into it? Because that has always been a huge struggle for me. I can start things. Sometimes I struggle with the consistency, but every once in a while, I am consistent to a T. And then it only takes one time of not doing it, literally one time, and the whole thing's gone. Literally disappeared. I once did, and I was so proud of myself, especially with managing my chronic health conditions. But I did 10 minutes of yoga morning and evening. And I say this because this is a big deal for me. For how many months was it for? It was maybe like 5 months or something. Like it was a long time. And then I went to my cousin's wedding. And so I couldn't do it that evening. And then it was gone because I didn't do it once. And I stuck at it for 5 months and I couldn't do it one time. And it was gone. And it's so frustrating because why? Why? Well, after just one time was it gone? I have actually, this was a few years ago now, and I have actually gotten better at this now. I did a lot of practice around starting something and intentionally skipping it to then get back onto it. So I did some practicing around like intentionally not doing it that day rather than not doing it because something outside of my control meant I couldn't and then I lose it. I intentionally practiced with, I'm not going to do it today, but I am going to do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I did actually do it.
Okay. And that was helpful.
Oh, yeah, that was really helpful. Yeah. It kind of that shifted that all or nothingness a bit. And so now I'm a bit of a stop, rather than stop.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
So I can start now, but it took practice.
Yeah. So what that made me think about is, so failing can get in the way. So if you miss a day, if you fail to do a day, that can kind of throw you off the wagon. But what popped into my mind was I've had experiences where I've realized that I'm succeeding at what I set out to do, and that throws me off.
Oh, okay.
So I've had it before where I shared in a Facebook group celebrating that I had consistently done my Instagram posts for my business for 4 months. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I don't know exactly if it was the next day, but it was very soon after if it wasn't the next day. Again, I just stopped posting. And I know, so, for me, that kind of my story is some of the message that I've had growing up is don't fail, but I've also had the message don't succeed. So even that can throw me off. And that isn't spoken about so much, I think.
No, absolutely. I don't think that is something that's spoken about a lot. And yet isn't something, do I relate to that? I don't think I do. It's now making me want to question. But no, I think when I'm succeeding at something, that gives me more motivation to continue, I think.
Yeah.
But I guess ultimately what you're talking about there is self-sabotage.
Yeah. So when you said, do I relate to that? I was like, well, I feel like there are parts of me that don't relate to it. Like, why wouldn't you want to be successful? Because part of me is so driven towards success. And this came after years of therapy that I realized that the self-sabotaging things that I was doing is because it didn't feel safe to be successful.
Yeah.
And so I did an exercise. It was in a meditation, and it was, so you had to imagine yourself as like your best self, like your most accomplished self, and stand in front of your mum and stand in front of your dad as your most accomplished self, and just notice the emotional response. And I think, perhaps for many people, I don't really have a sense of the balance of this actually. But I imagine that for many parents, that would be a good thing, that the parents would be proud and happy. But I think also it can be, if you've got a parent who needs to be needed, then you being successful can feel like a threat to them, because then they're not needed, they lose their identity. That's going to come through emotionally.
Or if you've become more successful than what they were.
Exactly. So if you've got a competitive parent, then there's going to be different emotions. So in order to, and often this is not a conscious process at all. This has taken it took me years to realize it. It's been another 8 years nearly since I realized it, and I'm still working on it. But yeah, that unconscious drive to stay connected to our parents is so strong that it does and will drive our behaviors and the self-sabotage or self-protection behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've potentially, talking about it now, had the internal message created by myself, I think, but from experiences in life that it's not safe to not be successful. So almost the opposite. And I think that's where so much of my drive, but also difficulties over the years have been about having to be successful and just feeling awful when I perceive that I'm not being successful, even if like I actually have been, but it's
Mhm.
not good enough, it's not enough.
Yeah.
And that's where so much of my time is still is, not as much as it used to, that's for sure, but is spent in the future, and where I can daydream and fantasize about future things all day long. I have so many ideas for things that I would like to do, right from realistic and achievable to, well, to absolutely never going to happen, to could happen but would involve a serious change and shift to your life. And so many of us, and I think research backs this up, but such a significant proportion of us spend so much time in our head thinking about the future rather than being here in the present in our lives as they are today, in the here and now. And I have learned that that is not a bad thing to do. It's not stopping that, because I actually get quite a lot of joy and enjoyment around daydreaming and imagine these fantastical kind of future scenarios that I might find myself in. If that is planning to quit my job and move to Botswana to work with elephants, then fine, that's what I'm going to think about and plan about for the rest of the week. And I love the idea of that. I'd love to do that. So it's not doing that. I get a lot of enjoyment from doing that. But it's also thinking about how, if you are like me, how much does that take away from you enjoying your life here in the present as it is?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important point. Yeah, it's a bit uneasy for me because yeah, I also I can also be in my head a lot. Yeah, like I say, planning, hoping, wishing.
What do you think it would be like to approach the new year with more gentleness than pressure, in a way that can still honor that it's okay to have goals and intentions for yourself? Those things can be important to help drive your life forwards and where you would like to be, but also in a way that isn't so all or nothing, pass or fail, shame induced, where you can hold more, gentleness and compassion for yourself.
Yeah, I think, going back to what you were saying before about having a word of the year instead of like a rigid plan. So I think it's about 3 years ago, I came across Danielle Laporte's, I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's called like desire mapping or something like that. And it just changes goal setting completely because you don't plan to do tasks. You go through a process to come up with what she calls core desired feelings. So you start with, what are the ways that I want to feel this year? And then you can start to plot practical things underneath those feelings, but the focus is the feelings. And they don't have to be emotions as we would normally think about them. So I'll just quickly pull up, where are we? 2020. So they don't have to be like emotions as you would normally think of them. So the first time I did it, the words that I came up with were intentional, nourished, elegant, joy, and adventurous. And then I think in later years, one of the years, so 2023, one of my words was sunlight, which wasn't necessarily about literally going outside and getting sunlight, although that was part of it. Some of it was just like, what makes me feel lit up? Like that's sunlight, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm really liking this.
Yeah, it felt like such a supportive process. And like I was really connecting with myself through this process. And I think it was quite pricey, but I managed to find a PDF that I assume I think she'd hosted it on Amazon web hosting. And when I Google searched, it was just there. I think it's still there if you search for Danielle Laporte design mapping. But yeah, it just felt like such a nurturing process.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that sounds lovely. I mean, speaking about a nurturing process, It's kind of made me think how you think of New Year goals and you think of, I'm going to join the gym and go 3 times a week. I've never heard anybody say, my New Year's resolution is to rest more. My
Yeah.
New Year's resolution is to take care of myself better.
Yeah. But well, even in that though, I think even if so with more traditional New Year's resolutions, I think even if you did have a goal of looking after yourself better, there would still be that rigidity to it. It would still be, thinking about your skincare, like it would still be like, right, well, I'm going to do my skincare every day. I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to do this every day. And it's still got that feel of like, yeah, like I say, on the wagon or off the wagon. You're doing it or you failed. Like I was just thinking about, so it's not a nurturing process. It's the words that came into my mind were like, it can be a brutal process or it can be like a punishing process. There's like this kind of inner sergeant major that's like whipping you along to like, harder, faster, get it done. And yeah, the process with the desire mapping felt more like having this kind of dreamy, nurturing mother being like, who are you, my darling? And what would you like for your life?
I like that. That was making me think of, so when I said like a New Year's resolution to rest more, I had this image in my head of this like secondary school PE teacher in little shorts and a whistle standing over you on the sofa, being like, rest now, sit down,
Relax. Yeah, chill out. Which is not restful.
No, but
Yeah.
it also brings into how much shame plays a part in any goals or things we set for ourselves. We live in such a culture of shaming ourselves and shaming other people into succeeding, despite the fact there is a mountain of research that shows that shame is not the way to get people to do better.
Yeah.
And yet we still do it to
Yeah.
other people. School systems are literally still designed on
Yeah.
shaming children into doing better.
Yeah.
And we then do it to ourselves. Whereas the types of alternatives that we've been talking about feel kinder, feel more nourishing, but still recognize that we want to develop and grow and do new things and maybe sometimes try and stick at new things where possible.
Yeah. 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 I think sustainable is such a good word. You used the word sustainable before. And because shame, I think the shame idea persists because it can work in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
Being hard on yourself can work in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't see, what I see all the time as a therapist, but what what people might not see is the damage that shame also inflicts. That, yeah, you might make a small amount of progress or even a large amount of progress in a small amount of time, but you're also digging yourself in a deeper hole and a deeper hole and a deeper hole each time. That gets harder and harder to move out of this place of feeling ashamed. Oh, there's a great quote. There's a great quote on this. Let me just quickly grab it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find the exact one, but it's a similar one. So this is by Janine Roth, and Janine Roth works with food and eating issues, body issues. So she's talking about weight loss, but she says to change your body, you must first understand that which is shaping it, not fight it, not force it, not deprive it, not shame it. Because if you force and deprive and shame yourself into being thin, which you can change for anything, you end up a deprived, shamed, fearful person who will also be thin for 10 minutes. I just think that's so important. Like you can't. So I think the quote that I was thinking about is she's talking about feeling loved, perhaps. Like you can't shame yourself into loving yourself. It just doesn't work. If shame is the method to get yourself somewhere, the outcome will be feeling ashamed.
Yeah, whether you've achieved, even if you've achieved that thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that just further highlights how important it is that goal setting, having hopes, desires, dreams for the future is not the enemy. Of course, you can start things at any time of the year. Sometimes the fresh start effect does provide the initial motivation to provide something new. But then it's how we do that, how we interact with that, how we talk to ourselves, how rigid we are, how we account for when motivation dips, when life happens and we can't do it for a bit. That really matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So how can you do it sustainably? That feels like the important the important question.
Yeah. And that sustainability doesn't have to mean, like we said, you're sustainably doing it every day. But if you started something at the start of the year and by the end of the year, you're still doing that thing, even if you've had breaks, even if there was a month that you didn't do it full stop, that over the course of the year, you have still stuck to something and been sustainable.
Yeah. Or if you haven't stuck to it, if you have tried it, decided you didn't like it and moved on to something else, great.
Yeah, awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
So if you're heading into New Year feeling flat, unsure, or already behind, maybe you're not failing, maybe you're just human.
Maybe you don't need to be a new you. Maybe the real growth is learning to stay with yourself as you already are.
So here's your reminder to do less, breathe more, and let this year unfold at its own pace. Next time, we'll be talking about being too young to be this old. That feeling when you feel like you should be more sorted by now, or that you've missed out on living because of healing or surviving.
But for now, we'll leave you with this question. What would change if your New Year's resolution wasn't to become someone else, but to make peace with the person you already are? That's all from us today. If this episode made you feel a bit less alone, the best way to help us reach more people is to subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Those simple clicks help other sensitive humans find us when they need it most. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.